Okay, so Rav Moshe is muted. You have to unmute yourself, Rav Moshe.
It says that the host disabled the share screen.
At least you're not muted anymore, so we can hear you.
All right, yeah, that will be worse. I'd rather be able to share my screen.
You can. Sorry, I didn't disable, I just didn't enable.
Okay.
I would never do that to you much. Okay.
Let me just get it to
Anything
the right.
else?
Okay. Okay, I hope everybody is doing well, feeling well, doing well. Please, I know you have yourselves muted, but if somebody has something to say, then please
I
feel
have a
free.
question for you. It's not from our class, but if it takes us
Okay.
more than 2 minutes, then just say no. Okay, so we were referring to a Perush Levush HaOra. So I looked it up and it says that it's a super commentary to Rashi's commentary on the Torah by Rav Mordechai Yafi, 1535 to 1612, commonly known as the Levush, after the 10 works he wrote, the names of which with that word. And that's a little confusing to me. He wrote 10 words. What did he write? What word did he use 10 times? After which word? I don't understand what he's saying.
After read that again, the last part of it.
Commonly known as a levush, after the 10 works he wrote, the names of which with that word. There's no commas, so I don't know I don't understand what's meant.
It's
He
interesting.
wrote 10 works.
I've seen the Levush. He's quoted both in terms of his parish also on, in terms of commentaries. He's also quoted often in halachic works. So in the Shulchan Aruch it sounds like he's sort of a contemporary of Yosef Karo and Rav Moshe Isserlis if he lived in the 1500s. But so as the later halachic works, also the Mishnah Berurah or the Ber Hetiv, which are super commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch, do quote the Levush. So I don't know what he calls those works, but I do know that he did also write works. I've seen him primarily quoted more in halachic works.
Okay.
He wrote different books that had the word levush in, and he was known as the Baal HaLevushim. He wrote a 10-volume codification of law, and
I see. So the word levush, in other words, in his 10 works, the first word was always levush.
Or a word, yeah.
I got it. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you all.
Levush Malchut and
Oh, there you
Sfarad.
go. So the first word was levush.
And Levush Achor, Levush Ateret Zahav, Levush Habot Vargaman, Levush whatever. Yeah, right.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm muting myself.
Maybe he had a clothing store on the side.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Google
On
knows
the
all
Lower
about
East Side,
it.
maybe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't know that either. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, I'd like to, oops, I got the wrong thing here. Okay. In Shmona Prakim, I'd like to continue with the Shmona Prakim. We're up to the fifth of the Shmona Prakim. Again, I don't want to, I like to keep things moving, so I don't want to, the Shmona Prakim is so interesting, but to try to not spend too many more weeks on it, maybe one or two. But the fifth parak, the Rambam talks about, he spoke up until now about what he calls what I call the healthy personality, healthy midot, when a person is able to find that middle way, and in each and every midah, which has the two extremes, which are bad, and all midot, which can go from the various extremes equidistant to the middle, and what the Torah helps to keep us on, either through teaching us the story, teaching us about God, giving us mitzvos, which are some of them at least divine, designed to keep us from straying from the middle. Here in this parak, he talks about the matarat ha'adam in this world. So keeping emotionally healthy, and we're going to see he's talking about physical health also, really should be towards the best way is that they're all towards one purpose. And what he begins this parak with by saying is, it's matarat ha'adam. What is matarat ha'adam? Tzarich ha'adam sheyishtamesh bekochot nafsho kulam. Person needs to use all of their powers, all of their strengths, all of their nefesh, their I won't say spiritual powers, but I'll say whether it's personality or their life force, lefi hade'ah shehitzana beperek shelifnei zeh, v'yasim, which is to keep in the middle, to keep them healthy, v'yasim leneged einav tachlit achat, and put towards them one tachlit, a tachlis, one goal. Meaning a person could be healthy, just like we know with physical health. A person can work out and eat healthfully and be healthy, but for what purpose? So he's saying that we want to be in a certain place, but we want to be in that place so that we can accomplish one primary goal in this world. Vihi, and what is that? Hasagat Hashem Yisparach. Being able lahasig. To hasig means to understand, to be able to contemplate, to interface with God. Hashem Yitbarach. Kifi yecholet ha'adam v'leda'ato. As much as a person is able to. That's something he talks about also, others talk about. Man can only understand God to a certain degree because we're human, because we're limited by being physical beings, that our neshamot are bechibur with a physical body. That limits our ability to understand or to hasig God. Certainly, I don't know if any being is able to see God completely, but certainly because we're physical beings, that limits us. As Hashem said to Moshe at some point, when Moshe said to Hashem, "Hareini na et kivodecha," show me your glory. Let me understand your essence. And Hashem said to Moshe, no, ki lo yir'ani ha'adam v'chai. What an interesting pasuk. Lo yir'ani ha'adam v'chai. You can't see me and live. Now, it's not like, it's in the old Westerns, I'll tell you, but I'll have to kill you. It's not what God is saying to Moshe. Moshe is saying to God, God is saying to Moshe, as long as you're alive, there's limitations. That itself limits you on how much you can perceive, understand me. But that itself is limiting. And that's why God says to me, Et achorai yera'u ufanai lo yera'u. You can't see my face, you could see my back. What does that mean, you could see my back? With the back, you see someone's back, you see someone's face, you won't mistake him with someone else. You see someone's back, it's not a yediyah brura. You see someone's back and say, oh, you looked like him. I thought you were her. I thought you were him. Because from the back, people could look alike. It's not as defining. So that's when God says to Moshe, it's not as defining. You could see God doesn't have a front and a back. You can see my back, but not my front. But the tachlis of a person, according to what the Rambam is saying, is as much as possible to be able to understand, to perceive God. V'yu ma'asav kulam, and really the individual, the human who is at peak performance is doing everything. Ma'asav kulam tnuotav, his movements, umenuchotav, and his resting. V'chol imrei piv, and all of his speech, miviyim el hatachlit hazeh, should be towards the purpose of reaching this goal. Ad shelo yeh b'ma'asav shum ma'aseh lebatala, that there's nothing that a person does which isn't towards this purpose. Ritzoni lomar, what purpose? Ma'aseh shelo yavi el hatachlis hazeh. Everything that a person could do could bring a person to this tachlis.
I have a question. Is he equating dveikut with hasagat Hashem? In other words, connecting up with God is the same thing as comprehending God to the best of our ability?
It's a good question. One, he sounds like he's, when we think of dveikut or dveikus, we think about something which is more emotional than intellectual. The Rambam here, the way I see it, is talking about something which is intellectual. Hasaga, lahavin, to come to interface with God on an intellectual understanding level, as opposed to ecstasy, dveikut. Now, I don't know if he's being, again, some might, and maybe it's accurate to distinguish between these two. Truthfully, I think that one without the other is lacking. To be somebody who is, a fool and doesn't understand the first thing about God and is standing in an ecstatic state. I'm with God and I'm just, dancing and crying and feeling, but it's not accompanied with a depth of dveikut, which is understanding the ways of God, is lacking. And maybe somebody who's the cold and it's just an intellectual thing. There are people who don't show a lot of emotion, but in some ways they are, you can feel and see, Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, Zichrono Livracha, sometimes he did show emotion, but for the most part, he didn't he didn't jump around during davening. It was, does that mean that his connection with God was any less? I don't think so. But the Rambam clearly is putting here an emphasis on an intellectual hasaga. And, Torah, I think but listen, I don't want to get into, Chasidus and the Dveikus and, to each their own. And certainly it is accompanied with a trembling in the ideas of Charada. The Rambam himself, by the way, I'll bring it up. We should do. The Rambam talks about the ahava, the mitzvah of ahavat Hashem in Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah. He compares it. He says he compares it to the love between a man and a woman, where a person is thinking about all day, and you just mishugal davar. And so clearly the Rambam is endorsing an ecstatic kind of experience and a love which is an emotional love, an emotional chibur to God. Here, what I would say, I guess what I answer your question is, Here he's talking about what you put your purpose to. What everything that you do should be to understand more and more God, to be close to God, to understand his ways. What a person experiences as a result of that, to what extent it's emotional, I don't think he's addressing here. Let's put it that way. Let's see further, maybe you can understand, but I think you're raising it's a good point that you raise.
Is that anything in connection to the idea of Shiviti Hashem L'Nagdi Tamid?
Yes, exactly. I think what he's talking about here is and if I'm not mistaken, I think he might bring Shiviti Hashem, maybe not, but it is definitely what he's describing here is Shiviti Hashem L'Nagdi Tamid, that always in whatever I do, and what's so beautiful and important, and what the Rambam talks about here, is that it doesn't mean a person needs to be saying Tehillim all day, or learning Torah all day, or doing anything particularly all day. But it means that whatever we do, it should be with that shikul and that cheshbon and that direction to bring me closer to God. And that's part of Shiviti Hashem L'Nagdi Tamid. Shiviti, it's interesting because davening, it's Shiviti Hashem L'Nagdi Tamid is another aspect of it, which I don't think the Rambam's talking about here, is that whatever I do, I'm always should recognize that it's in the presence of God, which is saying it's a little bit different from what he's talking about here. This is not an issue of the presence of God, but rather the purpose of everything I do. Shiviti Hashem L'Nagdi Tamid, that even when I'm sitting on my couch, and even when I'm eating, and even when I'm in the bathroom, and whatever I'm doing, I recognize that like we teach the kids, Hashem is here, Hashem is everywhere. So that's part of Shiviti Hashem L'Nagdi Tamid. I always have mul einai, that I'm always in the presence of God. This is a different aspect. I do think it's also connected with it, but it's not a matter of the presence of God, but again, the purpose of everything I do. Before I do something, I weigh it, and I say, is this going to bring me closer to God? Is this bringing me closer to a knowledge of God? And let's see what he says. Let's read a little bit. He says, Kagon, he speaks about health. I'm just going to skip a little bit. I'm not going to do it all. The person shouldn't be just to eat or to be healthy, just to be healthy. So I only eat foods which taste good. I should eat what's healthy for me. Whether it tastes good or not. Again, there's no mitzvah, the Rambam said this before, to eat non-tasty food. But the thing which should guide and I'll speak to myself here, because this is something which I know I struggle with, I should eat what's healthy for me, not necessarily what tastes good. And if for some reason a person should always be trying to get themselves in the middle place so that they're able to carry on with their life's work. As we say, we eat to live, and we don't live to eat. Now, there are times if a person sees that they have no desire for good food, so a person like that, the Rambam here says it, someone who doesn't have a desire for food, so you could sometimes awaken yourself to eat things which are tastier. Somebody who feels like they're depressed. So they listen to music, they do things to bring them, to lift themselves out of that depression. Ubitiul beginot ubibinyanim naim. Listen to the Rambam talking and looking at nice architecture and going to see the nice gardens. Ubiyeshiva in surot naot, and sitting in a nice, pleasant place, sitting on the beach, sitting along the riverside, the stream. Ukiyoti b'devarim shemarchivim hanefesh umesirim hirhurav hakodrim mimena. And they take away the bad kodrim. I'm not exactly sure. Misirim hirhurav, and to take away thoughts which lead him to a bad place. Kedar, the word kedar, I'm not sure what kodrim means. V'amechuvan b'chol zeh, but in everything a person does, sheyavri gufo, that a person should be healthy, the tachlit briut gufo, and why should I be healthy? Liknot chachma, to be able to gain wisdom. Now here he's clearly talking about an intellectual endeavor, that it's through the chachma, learning the chachmat and learning the chachmat elokim, we become closer to God. Same thing, somebody who, you have a business, you make money, you have a career. What should be the tachlis? So that you should use it for good things, and you should also grow, you use it to be able to grow. And use the money to be healthy, and to continue to exist, everything that a person does this way, and everything which he does, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have skipped that first paragraph up here. A person's kavanah in their eating, in their drinking, vishenato, in napping, in sleeping, and in waking up, utnuato, umenuchato, lebriat gufo, to be healthy, levad, va'achefetz bebriut gufo, shetimatzeh hanefesh, kulaha bri'im, shleimim, v'hitmasra lechachmot, uknot hama'alot hamidutiyot, v'adiburiot, ad she'agia la'ota tachlis. That everything a person does in this way, they're eating, they're drinking, they're going to sleep and taking a nap, they're working out in the gym, they're going to on vacation, they're going to a nice garden, they're going for a walk on the beach. Everything a person can live 24/7, the Rambam is talking about living 24/7 for the purpose of getting of connecting with God, and being bari, vishalem, healthy, and in a place where a person can reach the heights of knowing chokhmat Hashem. It's almost like those of us who studied Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where it all starts from the pyramid, the bottom things on the pyramid, that a person has to have their safety needs and feel safe, and they have to be nourished so a person doesn't die, has to have those needs. And then you have to feel part of something, you have to feel love. And the top of the pyramid is what Maslow calls self-actualization, that a person, and whatever our lives, however he describes self-actualization, this is the way the Rambam is describing, that through becoming litchaber to Hashem, through knowledge, so that in a way that a person is living every moment to know God, then a person is self-actualizing. So maybe, and the Rambam will say it, somebody mentioned before, Shiviti Hashem lenegdi tamid, what the Rambam brings later is an important pasuk, is B'chol derachecha da'ehu is the pasuk, B'chol derachecha da'ehu, Mishlei, B'chol derachecha da'ehu, in all of your ways, know him. That means everything that a person does should be towards that of knowing God, of being healthy and being relaxed and being able, we all know that if we're bothered by something, if something is sitting on our heads, whether it's a personal thing, it's a work thing, it makes it difficult to strive to attain, shleimut, a high thing. Yesterday I had a meeting with someone, some mefakachat from Misrad HaChinuch, where she basically threatened to, you're doing this and you're doing that, and we're gonna, they'll close us down and they'll do that. To come home after that meeting with the mefakachat from Misrad HaChinuch, who basically, said, oh, I'm gonna get all these problems. And then to come home after work and open up my Gemara and do the Daf Yomi is a struggle. It's a struggle to concentrate on those things which bring us higher if we're tarud. So we want to live our lives to have menuchat hanefesh, but not just for the purpose of menuchat hanefesh, but for the purpose of being able to know God so that we can open up, worry free, or put things on the side. And that's why it's so, people who are able to do that, and people who were able to do that in all kinds of situations and kinds of times when they were dealing with worse than the mefakachat of Misrad HaChinuch threatening you, but all kinds of sorrows, and yet were able to concentrate on knowing God, on learning Chochmat Elokim, is almost superhuman, and it's just amazing to me. It's just an amazing thing, and that's really what the Rambam's talking. And it's interesting because let's just continue in this, because I want to. The Rambam here talks about Erko shel limud harefuah, how important it is to know, to be, the fact that great rabbis, every Jewish mother wants their kids, my son the doctor, my son the doctor. The Rambam was a doctor, the Ramban was a doctor, there were others who were doctors also, but they saw in being a doctor not just a good paycheck, they saw in being a doctor a mission, that part of being healthy is that it brings a person. Medicine can bring a person to arrive at the true happiness. Health doesn't bring true happiness just by health. Working out and being in a great physical shape also doesn't. Going on vacations also doesn't. All of those things can be part of our avodas Hashem, but they bring us to the next to the step where we can devote our minds and our bodies to avodat Hashem. V'yeh limuda v'drishata mehagdola shebe'avodot. These things, medicine could be shebe'gdola she'avodot. V'lo tia ota sha'a ka'ariga u'kenaga. It's not like you're just stop doing another profession, like you're a weaver or you're a carpenter. Shekein ba nisha'er ma'asenu v'yeh ma'asim enoshim miviyim ela ma'alot ha'amitiyot. Nisha'er ma'asenu. With it, we can judge with refuah, and he's talking about both refuat ha'guf and refuat ha'nefesh. And he says, because a person who just eats and what tastes good is like he says kibehema, areza kibehema shavin, ve'en ze ma'aser adam, ki ma'aser adam b'asher hu chai nimshal kabehemot nidmo, v'lo yeh ma'aser enoshi el ksheyochal ha'mo'il biyoter, ופעמים יניח הערב ויאכל הערב v'yochal hanimas. Sometimes you'll decide to eat something. You'll pass on what tastes good, ha'arev, and you'll eat the thing which doesn't taste good. Kefi drishat hamo'il, based upon what's needed, drishat hamo'il biyoter, for your health. V'zeh ma'asa shebede'ah. V'zeh nivdal ha'adam b'ma'asav mizulato. And this is what separates man from
Rabbi,
yes.
it's Yehudit Spiro. How are you? I've got a question. I wasn't sure if I was going to ask it, but the more that you go on, I realize this question. On one hand, it's true. Intellectually, a person has to learn all that they can learn. On the other hand, I'm thinking of the 70s when I was very involved with Kiruv. You have to get somebody sometimes by their emotion. You take people and you tell them, well, you got to learn this and you got to learn that and you got to learn this. That's not necessarily, you're not necessarily able to bring somebody in if we just emphasize the intellectual, which is no question, it's very important. But I think we would have lost a lot of people had we not also emphasized. I mean, you said we're not going to go into the Hasidic movement, and I understand. It saved an awful lot of neshamas at a time that if you would have said, no, if you don't know how to learn, then you're an oisvarf, and we don't want you. And you know that that was an attitude, and it still is an attitude in some circles. All right, my kid, he doesn't like to learn. Is he a good kid? Yeah, he's a very good kid. He does this, he does that. And somehow it's less valuable. And I know that we are mishader that message. And I wonder what you think about it as a mechanech and as a rav.
I think you raise a really important point for sure. I'm sure everybody has what to say about this. I'm a little bit, more on the side where, I understand that, and I see as a hook, and people who get, it's spending a Shabbos, which really brings them in. I do think that what keeps them is show me the meat and potatoes, and that everybody has a chelek in Torah. And
so I agree. But why did Rav David Feinstein have to fight so hard to allow Art Scroll? Who were the people that weren't going to allow Art Scroll so it would open up the world to people that were never going to know Hebrew well? There's a certain elite attitude. I don't mean from the Rambam. I mean from our world right now. The Rambam is saying in Shemona Prakim, we have to be Me'uzan. We have to be Shvil HaZahav. But I think we're not Shvil HaZahav. Maybe we're getting there now. But for a long time, if you were learned, you're in. If you're not learned, you're out. And why did Rav David Feinstein have to fight so hard to get Art Scroll? There were plenty of Gedolim that did not want Art Scroll. And to get to the point that the Rambam is talking about, you'd have to have ways for people to learn who might not have had it.
I would say a couple of things. I think the Art Scroll question is it's a separate discussion. I do have what to say about the Art Scroll thing.
Okay.
I do understand a little bit why. I don't think it was purely just to keep things elitist. I would like to. I'm going to make a note about it because I think it's an interesting thing. The Art Scroll, but I think it's a side discussion of why there were people who were against and Gedolim. You're right. Who were against the Art Scroll, and look what it's done. The second thing I would say is, the Rambam talks about a Shvil HaZahav, but let's be clear, the Rambam is saying something is that there's not, he's saying 100% the person who's really on the high level, and he's going to say it now, that not everybody gets to this level, but he's saying what to strive for is not, I spend 50% of my time serving God and 50% of my time serving myself. He's saying we're supposed to spend 100% of our time serving God. Now, part of serving God doesn't mean sitting and learning Gemara all day, but part of serving God is also eating, drinking, relaxing, playing sports. If it's really for the purpose, and that way a person, but the Rambam here, and I've said this before, when he talks about the middle ground, the izun, here there's no middle ground here. He's saying a person should be fully committed to service of God and to knowledge of God. And I would just say to answer you, again, I won't disagree with you. I mean, your life experience, and I'm sure other people, people often get, you're right, the emotional can't be discounted. And you're right, there were also movements, I mean, the whole rise of Hasidut, there was a certain elitism that if you make it in yeshiva with the, that's good. Otherwise, you're nebuch. But on the other hand, I don't know if we've gone what extreme where we're at now, but again, I'm speaking for myself. I do believe that, if we want something lasting and real, then interfacing on an intellectual level is with the divine is really important. And if it's just going to be connected to emotion, first of all, it could lead to all kinds of places, which we all agree we don't really want it to get to, where if it's just emotion, then, a religious frenzy, whether it's Judaism or lahavdil, another religion, can lead to all kinds of terrible places. And also, does it last? Does the kid who goes to yeshiva in Israel and is just into the kumzitzes and the Musar Shmuzim and the books, the fluff stuff, I'm sorry to say it, but when they go back 5 years, 10 years down the line, is it going to stay if they don't have the real the learning on a real mashma'uti, interfacing with the day of Hashem and the mind of God, so to speak. The Rav Chaim Volozhin talks about this idea in the Nefesh HaChaim, and he certainly was more of a Hasidic, not Hasidic. He was actually, what he spoke about there was in some ways very anti, but the mystical, I meant to say, mystical kind of a thing, where he really talks about, the idea of learning even, that, people learning isn't about sitting and singing. And if it's about dveikus, a person could read the same piece of Gemara over and over, Shnayim Ochzim B'talis, Shnayim Ochzim B'talis. It's an intellectual endeavor. And through that intellectual endeavor, we connect with God on a very, very real way. Again, I won't discount or argue with you, but I think, and finding the balance is tough. But I think it's a good conversation and a good issue that you raise. I'm a little bit, I have some sons-in-law who are a little neo-Hasidic also, so I appreciate it, and I understand it. But I think if it doesn't have the meat and potatoes, I guess I question whether it's going to be lasting. Let's move on, because we can spend a lot of time talking about this topic. So, and the art school, I'm going to make a note, because I do want to give you my thoughts on that. At least maybe the Rambam talks about the Ish HaShalem, and again, when he speaks about everything as a way to reach God, and everything that way. And he says, even the Chochmot, look what he says here. Uma matarat hamadaim, uma she'en to'elet ba la'ota tachlit. And that which seems like it doesn't have doesn't follow that purpose. Kishe'elot ha'algebra v'ha'ashva'a v'sefer ha'charutim v'atachbulot, whether it's talking about architecture, design, physics, v'harbe b'shelot ha'handasa u'meshichat ha'mishkalim v'harbe kayotze ba'elu, all different kinds of wisdoms which don't seem to, how do they bring a person close to God? Tiyeh kavanah bahem, even that, those things, the kavanah could be, besides the fact that it could be a kavanah to make a living, to be able to do one's life's work, but also chidud hamoach, sharpening the brain, v'hit amlut b'koach hadibri, v'darkei hamofet, showing through, and mofet doesn't mean miracles, ways of showing a trial and error and experimentation. Ad she'yagia lo adam kinyan hayediyah bein ha'hekesh hamofti v'zulato. So that a person can deepen and broaden their thinking and their knowledge. And all of these chokhmot could be for this purpose. V'chein kol ma sheyilamed min ha'chokhmot min ha'diyot ha'elu shemishamshot derech ota tachlit ein din udvaram elav. There's no, that's not an issue if you're doing it for the real purpose. That's a good thing. And then he speaks about other tachlis, other purposes of doing these learning, and also speech. Dibur ha'adam v'hagbalotav v'chein diburei ha'adam kulam ein tzarech she'edaber. Person should only speak, and we studied this, I think, last year. The Rambam in his Perush on Pirkei Avos, on the last Mishnah in Perek Aleph, it says that Shimon beno amar kol yamai gedalti ben hachachamim v'lo matzati ledavar tov mishtika. I didn't find anything better than silence. And he speaks there, the Rambam, about all different categories of speech. He says also, all speech should be geared to that. Yakrev adam bo to'elet, o yidche hezek minafsho o migufo. Either speech which brings them benefit or keeps them from harm, o b'chachma, o b'mala, or some kind of wisdom, or how to be a better person, o b'shevach ma'ale o me'ula, o to praise, o b'gnut pchitut o bale pchitut. Because just other things don't bring a reason, don't bring a purpose, which is the purpose for towards the purpose that he's talking about, and that's what the Rambam keeps talking about. All of these things, and even having a nice house, and seeing nice things, and living in a way where a person is comfortable, also can be part of a person's total avodas Hashem. The Rambam is not talking apologetics here. He's not justifying people living in ostentatious or materialistic lifestyles. He's talking about lichatchila. He's saying lichatchila, if a person has to have harchavat adash, if you live in a hovel and you don't have room and the kids are on top of each other, how can they aspire to this if they're fighting all the time, and if you're falling over each other, and if you don't have the rechavat, like we all say, you have to get away a little bit, you have to air out your head. All of those things are for the purpose of serving God, and this is a ish hashalem. V'dash hamadrega azot hi madrega elyona me'od v'chamuda v'lo yasigua ela me'atim. Very few people, the Rambam says, really get to this madrega. The achar hishtadlut rabba me'od, to get to a level where everything I do is really toward this purpose, and all the other things which I'm doing are towards this purpose of being close to God. Now it's interesting, you did what you bring up, being close to God. The Rambam's talking about intellectual being close to God here. But, it could be, again, the Rambam is not talking about it, but his main point in this chapter is all those things that are leading me up to my work to being close to God could be and should be avodas Hashem. And that's what that's really what he's talking about. And this is complete avas Hashem. V'zeh asher darshu mimenu yisbarach shenachtor elav. This is what God demands of us. Ve'ahavta Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavecha u'b'chol me'odecha. Ritzoni lomar b'chol chelkei nafshecha. It doesn't say here the word nafshecha, which he leaves out, but that's what he means by kol chelkei, all the aspects of your nefesh. Sheta'aseh tachlit kol chelek mimena tachlit achat v'hi le'ahava et Hashem Elokecha. That all of our character traits and all of what we do and all of the parts of our nefesh should be towards this. Kvar zirzu bo chachamim or mizarez, they were me'oded, they spurred us on to this by saying, as we said, b'chol derachecha da'ehu. Uperushu chazal. Chazal said, even b'dvar avera. There's a Gemara which says, even when a person does an avera, also, it should be to an avera lishma. Ritzoni lomar shetasim la'oto ma'aseh tachlit ha'emet. Afal pi sheyesh bo dvar avera mitzad ma. That sometimes even we could be doing something, but even if there's something which has a negative aspect to it, that if it's being done for the right purpose, to think of an example of what he's saying, it could be done even for the purpose of serving, of really serving God. וכבר כללו חכמים עליהם השלום את העניין הזה כולו בביטוי הקצר שבאפשר, והקיפו את עניין הכיף שלם מאוד מאוד. כשנשאת דעתך לקוצר מילות הללו, איך ביטאו אותו עניין גדול ועצום בכללו. They put it in the shortest amount of words, Shlomo HaMelech, by saying, בכל דרכך he's saying what he's going to say, אשר נתחברו בו חיבורים, ולא ירדו לסופו, ידעת שנאמרו בכוח גדול בלא ספק, והוא מאמרם בצוואתם, and this is what he says במסכת זאת, וכל מעשיך יהיו לשם שמיים. That this way, it's possible that every action that a person should do should be l'shem shamayim. V'zeh anyan asher bi'arnuhu b'perek zeh. This is what I explained in this perek, and this is what I wanted to explain in this perek. That it's possible that a person lives their lives, that everything, literally everything, is done completely l'shem shamayim.
Rav Moshe.
Yeah.
What about the question, Nehaneta me'olami? I love cheesecake. I really love cheesecake. Okay, so not everybody does. So it brings me simcha. So, but simcha is not a mitzvah except for the shalosh regalim, right? I mean, I don't understand. I don't understand how you can serve God. I learned this many times. I don't understand how you can serve God while you're eating a piece of cheesecake. I am serving myself. I love that cheesecake.
Sima, aren't you thanking God before you even start to eat it, that he's given you something so delicious?
Correct.
And
I am kedusha.
That you have the ability to appreciate is tremendous because you know where it's coming from.
I'm kedushifying the act of eating.
Yes.
But let's face it, I'm eating that cheesecake not for avodat Hashem. I am making it on a higher level, but I am eating that for myself. I am not eating it for God.
Well, can't you eat it for yourself and then you'll feel good and you can do other good things then? Because you need to do things for yourself in order to do for others.
Yeah. I think there are two things. One is that what you're saying.
Isn't that what we just learned?
I think the point what you're saying is very significant, and that is that on one, if it's going to be eating away at you, excuse the pun, that you didn't eat the cheesecake, and you're not going to be able to go about because you're just thinking, and everything you're doing, you're just thinking about that cheesecake in the refrigerator.
Lo ad kedei kach.
Okay, all right. and if it gives a certain amount of menuchat hanefesh, and you're this, and it does, it's whether they call it blank
Obsession.
food, something food, comfort food. If it gives a person comfort, that's a whole new concept, comfort food, but the Rambam is saying that to some extent. And I would say something which I think Tema said, which is very true. It's not exactly, but if you eat that cheesecake on Shabbos, then you're taking that and making it also an act of buying nice clothing. I like nice clothing. But if we teach, and our kids, there's nothing wrong, our kids we shouldn't, if we want the middle ground, we want our kids to appreciate, looking nice and nice clothing. But if we're able to connect it, that nice clothing for Yantif or for Shabbos, or this is part of being Mechabed Shabbos, we sing about it in the Zemiros, Basar v'dogim v'chol matamim, and that's the way that we're being Mechabed Shabbos. Then you can, not just through the bracha, eating, and which is true, but I would say, it could be, one could say without the Shabbos thing, and if it's really not bothering you, then maybe the thing to do would be to stay away from the cheesecake. They say, I mentioned Rav Lichtenstein before, and our time is running short, but they say Rav Lichtenstein was into sports, and when I was in yeshiva in the Gush, he didn't do it so much then, but he would sometimes play basketball with the guys. But he was younger, he enjoyed sports. He once told us that he would sometimes watch a basketball game until the last minute of the game. And when the most exciting part, I watched, I turn on YouTube just for the last minute of the game, because that's what's exciting. But he would turn it off the last minute of the game to be kovesh his yetzer, so that to make it so it's not so important. So there is an element of being kovesh, the yetzer, and not to do it. But a person has to know themselves, well. According to what the Rambam's saying, it's easy to say everything is nice and it's all good, but it could be that a person should. It could be the person doesn't have good. There are people, thank God, that are not talking about this, where a person is losing their appetite, and they should be eating the cheesecake to help ignite the appetite. But it's a good question.
Which Rav Moshe are you talking about with the basketball? That was Soloveitchik?
No, I meant Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, I meant. Rav Aaron Lichtenstein told us that. I remember that when I was in the Gush.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's an aspect of asceticism, in a sense. He was embracing a moderate, or you might want to call it a modified, modern, however you want to put it. It's embracing a piece of asceticism.
Yeah, but I would say it was because maybe he saw, and he didn't exactly explain it this way, but the way I understand it is he saw that he had an ability to be pulled after enjoying it too much. So he was doing this to make sure that he can break that.
Toda.
Okay, we got through chapter. Hey, you raise, you guys as always raise good points, and I appreciate the all the input, and I look forward to continuing the discussion next week, God willing.
Toda rabba.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank
Stay
you.
healthy.
Thank you.
Amen.
Stay well.